Mesopotamia is called the land between rivers, which is Tigris and Euphrates. They are the first recorded civilization. The people there are called Sumerians. They had cities and ziggurats, which were temples. They developed laws and maths. They used irrigation for farming. They are the first inventors of wheel. Reason for collapse. They were invaded by Assyrians, Akkadians, and Babylon. Assyrians were known for their strong army and iron weapons. Another reason were the river changes. The rivers in Mesopotamia sometimes moved to different places. Big floods could destroy farms and homes. Sometimes there was not enough water, so crops could not grow. Using too much river water made the soil too salty, which made farming hard. These problems made it difficult for people to live there, and this helped cause the civilization to fall. Egypt was located in northeastern Africa. They were centered around the Nile River. They had defensible borders which separated Egypt from Mesopotamia. They had pharaohs, which meant kings, and gods on earth. They had pyramids, temples, sphinx, calendar, medicine, math, and hieroglyphics. The Nile was used for farming, trade, and calendar. It flooded annually and left fertile soil. Their religion was polytheistic. One powerful god was the Ra, which was the sun god. They believed in Osiris, which was the afterlife. Reason for collapse. They were conquered by Persians, then Greeks, and later by Roman. Greek was located in southeastern Europe. It was made up of city-states like Athens, Sparta, and Corinth. Greek was the birthplace of democracy. They focused on philosophy, theater, Olympic, and art. Greek's government was controlled by the Athens and Sparta. Athens were democratic and Sparta practiced oligarchy, which meant they are a militaristic state dependent on slave labor. The Athens and Sparta teamed up to defeat Persians in Persian wars. But soon after they had conflict, which followed up to Peloponnesian War, where Athens and Sparta fought each other and it weakened Greece. Sparta won, but was unable to unify the city-states. Hellenistic age was established by Alexander the Great of Macedonia. Alexander the Great conquered Persia, Asia Minor, and Egypt, which created world empire, and bureaucracy replaced the government. Alexander united Greece, but after his death, his empire split and Greek power faded. Greece was taken over by the Roman Empire. Rome was in Italy. It grew into a powerful republic, then the biggest empire controlling Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia. It incorporated Greek culture. Augustus Caesar was the first emperor. Some of their accomplishments includes roads, aqueducts, large cities, Christianity, and being the most powerful empire in the world. There were hardships and economic and political decline, and repeated civil wars damaged Rome. Caesar got assassinated, and Augustus became the next emperor. Pax Romana means Roman peace. It means 2 centuries without major war in Rome. Reason for collapse. Too many wars and invasions by Goths, Vandals, and Huns. They had economic trouble, high tax, inflation, weak government, and was too large. Byzantine was the east half of Roman that survived the fall of the West. Constantine established New Rome at Constantinople. Byzantine dominated the trade routes of Europe and Asia, and they controlled both Mediterranean Sea and Black Sea trade routes. They were also active in silk trade. They thrived because of distant enemies and were Christian. Reason for collapse. Close by Arabs, Slavs, and Turks became more powerful. So the Byzantine lost the economic dominance. Another reason why was religious controversy with the West. Fall of Constantinople meant the end of Byzantine. Early Middle Age. Fall of Rome, which is also called the Dark Age, led to German kingdoms to take over. Christian church became most powerful to unify Europe. There was frequent invasions by Vikings, Magyars, and Muslims. Preservation of Western civilization was possible from stopping Muslim at the Battle of Tours. Feudalism began, and most people were peasants working at large farms. What is feudalism? Grants of land given by lords in exchange for loyalty and protection from vassals and knights. Peasants owed labor and obedience, all owed to the church. Peasants were given land to work in exchange for some crops. Free peasants worked as skilled laborers. Fees charged for rent, roads, and bridges. Lords emerged as kings. Trade meant growth of towns and cities. Church had the most power. Lords were wealthy and owned much of land. Vassals and lesser lords got orders from the lords to protect the lands. They ordered the knights to protect and peasants to work in the lands. Islam was the founded teachings of Muhammad. Quran is the guide for Islamic laws and ethics. They created theocracy, government based on religion. Islam conquered Byzantine and Persian Empire. They spread to North Africa and Spain. Battle of Tours is when Muslims from Spain tried to move deeper into Europe, but they got defeated. This stopped spread of Islam further into Europe. Islam preserved culture of people conquered. Some of their successes includes farming, trade, math, hospital, science, and military. Inca was located in South America, in the Andes Mountain. It was ruled by the emperor and strong central government. They relied on farming and had no money. They traded with goods and services instead. They had successes in roads, bridges, and stone cities. They are polytheistic, and one of their powerful god included sun god. Reason for collapse: they were conquered by Spanish and their disease. Aztec was located in central Mexico. They were ruled by an emperor and had strong military. They were polytheistic and practiced human sacrifices to please gods. Some of their successions includes floating gardens, astronomy, architecture, and calendar. They were based on agriculture, trade, and tribute from conquered people. Reason for collapse: they were conquered by Spanish with help from Native Americans, and diseases spread from them. India is located in South Asia. They have the Indus River and the Ganges River. First civilization started in the Indus River, which became the Indus Valley Civilization. Their religion includes Hinduism, which started in the Indus River, and Buddhism, which started in northeastern part of India. India has belief in karma, reincarnation, and social hierarchy, which means people are born into their classes. They have success in math, discovered the zero and decimal systems, science, art, and literature. China developed from the Yellow River. The first dynasty was the Shang Dynasty, then the Zhou Dynasty, then came the Qin Dynasty. This is when they built the Great Wall. Then came the Han Dynasty, which is known as the Golden Age, and Silk Road happened here. The Silk Road is a major trade network connecting Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. China believed in Taoism, which means harmony with nature and simple living style. They also believed in legalism, which means living by strict laws and punishment to order. Some of their inventions include paper, silk, porcelain, gunpowder, compass, and merit-based exams. Age of exploration began when European powers explored to find new trade routes. Spain conquered lands like Americas, the Aztecs, and the Incas. The Columbian Exchange is the exchange of goods, animals, plants, and diseases between old and new worlds. This led to Native American population to decline due to disease and colonization. The 7-Year War happened between Britain and France. Native American mostly aligned with French due to better trade relations. They fought over territory and power of North America, Europe, and India. Britain won. They gained Canada and much of French land, which is the North American Empire. The British step is stepped after war, and they taxed American colonies, and this sparked American Revolution. 7-Year War resulted in shift in global power, which meant Britain is the dominant empire. Key events: 1754, George Washington fights at Fort Necessity. 1759, Battle of Quebec, major British victory. 1763, Treaty of Paris ends the war. Enlightenment is the time when people started using reason, science, and logic to understand the world. Thinkers highlighted natural rights, government by the people, separation of powers, and freedom of speech and religion. Impacts: inspired revolutions, democracy and modern governments, scientific thinking and human rights. American Revolution started because they were resisting British taxes such as Stamp Act, Townshend Act, and Tea Act. The Boston Tea Party was the protest against tea tax. Key issues were taxation without representation and British control of trade and laws. Battles of Lexington and Concord is the start of war. Declaration of Independence was written by Thomas Jefferson. Turning point is the Battle of Saratoga, where French helped because they wanted revenge to Britain after 7-Year War. Battle of Yorktown was when British surrendered. By Treaty of Paris, Britain recognized U.S. independence. Key people: George Washington, commander of Continental Army. King George III, the British King. Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams, working on Constitution. The Acts: Stamp Act, tax paper goods like newspapers, legal documents, and playing cards. Townshend Act, tax important goods like glass, tea, and paint. Tea Act, the British sold tea in cheap price, but because they're still taxed, Americans didn't like it. The U.S. Constitution replaced Articles of Confederation because it lacked central power. Philadelphia Convention is where they drafted the Constitution. Constitution created 3 branches of government. Legislative branch make laws, executive branch enforce laws, and judicial branch evaluate laws. Separating power checks and balances to prevent abuse of power. Federalism divides power between federal and state government. The Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments guaranteeing civil liberties. Civil War was caused by slavery. South wanted more power, but North wanted a strong U.S. government. South relied on land and using slaves for farming. North relied on factories. South became angry when Abraham Lincoln became president. Key events: war started at Fort Sumter. Emancipation Proclamation freed slaves in South. Gettysburg Battle resulted in big win for the North. 13th Amendment abolished slavery. Reconstruction's goal was to rebuild South and bring Southern states back to the U.S. and help formerly enslaved people to start new lives. The 13th Amendment ended slavery, 14th Amendment granted citizenship to all born in U.S., and 15th Amendment granted African American men to vote. Southern resistance. Some Southern states passed black codes to limit rights, and Ku Klux Klan used violence to scare black people. Union troops were sent in to help reconstruct Southern states, but eventually removed in 1877, which caused Southern leaders to take control again, and many African American lost rights. The U.S. federal government has 3 branches: the legislative branch, executive branch, and judicial branch. Legislative branch make laws. It has the power to declare war, and consists of Senate and the House of Representatives. Executive branch enforce laws. It consists of the President, Vice President, and the Cabinet. President can reject laws. Judicial branch, also known as the Supreme Court, evaluate laws. It has the Court of Appeals and district courts. It can decide if laws goes against the U.S. Constitution. Political parties or organizations that advocates a particular ideology and seeks to gain power within the government. There are 2 dominant political parties, the Democratic and the Republican. Democratic is represented by being liberal, the color blue, and the donkey. Republican is represented by conservatives, the color red, and the elephant. California produced 3 presidents: Herbert Hoover, Richard Nixon, and Ronald Reagan. Richard Nixon was a native Californian who became president. State flower is golden poppy, state bird is valley quail, state tree is redwood, and state freshwater fish is golden trout. At Brown v. Topeka Board of Education, Mendes v. Westminster ended Hispanic school segregation. California missions. Spanish missions aim to convert native to Christianity. First mission is San Diego de Alcala. Missions were part of Spanish colonization efforts. The natives suffered from disease and forced labor. El Camino Real is the road linking all 21 missions. The positive is the food, church, and structure. Negatives were disease, forced labor, and loss of culture of Native Americans. Native Californians. First people came from Asia 20,000 to 30,000 years ago. They spoke many dialects. They were not very warlike, and acorns were their major food. Religion included myths, nature spirit, and ceremonies. They believed in gender role of men hunting and women gathering. Some example of tribes were Chumash, Yurok, and Mohidiv. Items they used were baskets, tools, drums, and shell for money. How Americans gained California. Mexican War of Independence is when Mexico broke free from Spain and Alta California became part of Mexico. Ranch farms replaced the Spain churches. New policies of Mexican government allowed neighboring American colonies to move into California, and later American immigrants outnumbered Mexicans. Bear Flag Revolt is when Americans uprise against unstable Mexican government. Ultimate independence by the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo claimed California as American territory. California is the 31st state of the U.S. This is a visual map, and Bear Flag Revolt resulted in California Republic flag having a bear. Gold rush started when gold was found at Sutter's Mill by James Marshall. People rushed from all over the world, and they were called 49ers. Immigrants were from China, Latin America, Europe, and other states in the U.S. Most didn't find much gold. Gold rush helped grow cities like San Francisco. Native Americans and immigrants faced violence, displacement, and unfair treatment. California became a free state in exchange for a Fugitive Act to capture and return escaped slaves. The Big Four were key financial and political figures behind the Central Pacific Railroad. They funded and led the western section of the Transcontinental Railroad. The members were Leland Stanford, who was the governor of California and the president of Central Pacific Railroad, Collis Huntington, who was the financier and vice president, Charles Crocker, who was the director of construction, and Mark Hopkins, who was the financier and coordinator. Economic impact. Railroad boosted trade by connecting California to distant markets. There were growth in cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles. It expanded economy by increased commerce. Cultural and social impact. Increased population in Southern California. Promoted migration with cheap fares and advertisements. And the railroad became the largest landholder in the state. Transcontinental Railroad was built by 2 companies, Union Pacific and Central Pacific. It is built by many immigrant workers, from the Chinese and Irish. Crossing countries became much faster. It became from months to only a week. The railroad expanded trade, migration, and settlement. Native Americans lost land and their culture. The Transcontinental Railroad was the symbol of manifest destiny, belief in U.S. westward expansion. Chinese immigrants worked in low wages and harsh conditions, and this caused white workers to fear them taking their jobs. This sparked Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned Chinese immigration and made it hard for them to become U.S. citizens. The railroad companies got huge land grants from the government. Some became corrupt and overcharged farmers and settlers. The Octopus by Frank Norris is a political novel. In the novel, Railroad is described as an octopus, symbolizing its greedy, crushing grips on farmers, land, and politics. It shows how powerful companies exploited small farmers with unfair prices, land takeovers, and corruption. It exposed railroad abuse and helped fuel public anger. Progressive movement focused on government reform to end corruption and more power to voters, social justice to improve working conditions and child labor laws, support rights for women and minorities, and fight poverty and support education, and economic reform to break up monopolies, the control of supply of products or service, regulate big businesses, railroads, and tax systems, and environment protection and national parks. Key figures in the progressive movement: Theodore Roosevelt passed antitrust laws to break up powerful companies that hurt the competition, protected consumers, workers, and small businesses, made national parks, guarded forests and wildlife refuges to protect nature and preserve resources. Jane Addams helped immigrants. Susan B. Anthony and Alice Paul were women's suffrage leaders. California water system. Most water is in north, but people mostly live in south. Central Valley Project moved waters from north to south using dams and reservoirs. Shasta Dam is the largest water project in California. Los Angeles Aqueduct takes water from Owens River to Los Angeles. Shelton Sea helps water Imperial Valley. California geography. California has diverse lands, coasts, mountains, valley, and deserts. California is 800 miles long. California borders Oregon, Nevada, Arizona, and Mexico. Mount Whitney is the highest point and Death Valley is the lowest point. Climate. Coastal is mild and interior of California is dry and hot. Major rivers: Sacramento, San Joaquin, and Colorado River. California during Great Depression and World War II. Dust Bowl migrants. Severe droughts and dust storms in Midwest led to farmers moving to California. The Grapes of Wrath is a novel symbolizing Dust Bowl migrants. World War II created jobs in factories, shipyards, and aircraft production. California became major military and manufacturing hub. Japanese-American relocation. After Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, they were seen as a threat. They were forced to move into camps even though they were mostly citizens. Post-war California. Big growth in population and economy. 5 major regions: Hollywood, SoCal, Central Valley, Silicon Valley, and Napa. Major job sectors were at trade, government, business, health, and hospitality. 20th century California. Immigration boom from Japan and Midwest. Alien Land Act banned Asian immigrants from owning land who couldn't become citizen. It was aimed mostly at Japanese farmers. Asians dealt with segregation. Asian children were often placed in separate schools. They faced anti-immigrant daily attitudes in society. Oil, movies, and farming boomed.